Hello, friends adventurers. I'm M, and welcome to dMTable. It is finally time for what, you may ask? For a full review of Blessed and the Blasphemous from Sons of Singularity. It is an adventure module for role-playing, and this will be a full hands-on review. This is a paid review, but the amount is mostly symbolic, and I got interested in this project before it was promised to me that I would be paid, and decided to support it way back when, before its Kickstarter. So, since I supported it so long, why now? Well, I did need to read the book and make the video, but mostly I needed to wait to get the book, and since I finally got the book and got through it all, now I can do the full review. To avoid bias, I will try to give as much detail as possible without spoiling you directly about much of the campaign in question. I will try to go into as much tiny detail that is possible indeed, and you can then, from observation of my reactions, maybe form your own, rather than just taking my word for granted, whether this is a great module or not. So first things first, what is Blessed and Blasphemous? It, in short, is a sort of a Casablanca, as in the old movie, and the city and the area, based campaign with very historical approach, and yet a sort of overlay of supernatural. In the most classic way, these two things combine, and you get a noir supernatural genre that reminds of classic movies indeed. And yet it has its own touch of, shall we say, Lovecraftian on top of it. It is quite a bit of a hefty book, though I have digital copy at the moment. But yes, at several hundred pages, you can expect that there will be plenty to read. However, it is, when all said and done, delightfully straightforward and quite even recommended to the new DMs to learn how to run off of it. It's mostly so voluminous because of its approach to give you first exhaustive, but not per se completely exhaustive, not overboard overdone, but exhaustive setup of what historic period and region are you going to play or run, which in this case is this area of Morocco and surroundings in the North Africa during the start of World War II. It will be dealing mostly not with outright warfare as much as various sides, the local French rule and the incoming German side, as well as the England and the Allies vying and jockeying for position in the area. And this being a supernatural role-playing scenario, there will be also the lost city of Irem waiting for adventurers to discover and find it, and all these factions will be vying for the power that they believe resides within. Whether it does or doesn't, and what it brings to them, they may or may not know, or believe otherwise, and the players, as investigators of various backgrounds that they themselves may choose, gather there and drop in the midst of things. They will be free to choose whichever set of sides they want, and even form friends from ground up that may contribute or betray, potentially. Maybe not. Can you prevent any betrayal from taking place in such a scenario? We shall see, if you are one of the ones to run this. Book itself starts with describing, as I mentioned, the area and the history, and starts even with ancient history of the area to describe better the meaning and significance of City of Irem. That is the place about which the campaign is revolving around. And so we start hundreds and hundreds years ago and follow up to current day as of happenings. And at the beginning, this description is entirely historical and detailed. You might just enjoy it as if you were reading a tour guide preparing to take on a lovely trip to the region without any potentially war or supernatural being on the horizon, perhaps, but that is not the case in this case. For the players, they will be, unbeknownst to them, setting foot amidst various factions that will be both supernaturally inclined and participating in the warfare. Many illustrations and photographs, charts and drawings were given, all of which thus far there are historical photographs, and it's kind of incredible how many of them that depict exact place and location described. So you will be able to see in front of the front doors of almost every building that is mentioned in the texts, which helps tremendously with immersion in role-playing. And they are taken at the times described as opposed to today. Real city maps from the period, military maps, comments on the letters and statements of leaders and generals and people at the time of what they were doing and considering of doing, and so on and so forth, their strategies and thoughts and all as such. Even from all that detail, even I was surprised a bit reading some of these things, even though they're available for everybody, being pure history, but it's not something that is frequently mentioned in such a detail. So if you love history, you'll maybe even learn a thing or two. Regardless, after which we get to these little tidbits that look like they could be cut out. Of course, I would never do that to a book, I would have, but this is intended to be photocopied and then cut out and given to players as handouts. Of course, there's a booklet in this set of handouts, so you might not need to photocopy the entire book here, even though that is provided for in case you kind of don't have the booklet for some reason. So both things are available, and what these handouts are is sort of like a bits and pieces of your background in the local area of what people you know and where you can go that you know the people from, like in which cafes and restaurants and gathering places, clubs, etc. Now, what surprised me at first is how it seemed that the players will know absolutely everybody that is mentioned in the whole campaign whatsoever, but later on, when we get to the rules, it says that the players will be given these cards by DM and they'll be able to select which ones they want to have on their character, as opposed to their friend's character next to them, as opposed to the cards nobody takes for flavor. It's quite enjoyable to see something like that. The rules clearly state that the players will be able to decline any and all of them if they dislike any of these connections or how they're described. Maybe they can even jot down a thing or two by themselves if allowed by the DM, but that is not mentioned in the rules and will be up to the players asking for such custom edition. Now, I mentioned already how detail and quality is immense, and we come upon this more and more as we go along, because every single quest pretty much has a flow chart of how it works, its linear and non-linear parts, how they connect and reconnect, where they go and what they do, and these are illustrated flowcharts with documents and photographs of people and pictures of characters. I don't mean player characters, but people involved and where you meet them, where you go, what you do, and it's all at a glance from a full cover. of the page, and then the quest is fully explained separately as well. As such, this is one of the best modules I have ever seen to actually give to a new DM for DM to train. And not only because of this, but because it is somewhat a straightforward campaign, surprisingly enough, even though such detail has been put into it, it sort of goes pretty much as expected and follows a certain route that, well, it really is like a movie in that regard. Everybody, even who's new to role-playing, could really read this and understand why and how, and the most important part, actually, and why I'm really suggesting this if you are running this system and you want to teach somebody to run, is because this is full of DM advice that tells you how to run each encounter and how to run the whole quest and campaign and so on, to such points and details that what impressed me when I was reading playtest materials back then, during the Kickstarter, is when there was a description of a mailbox that a false company had, that the players go and check, and there's a description how the bottom of the box is dusty, and then there's a DM advice that explains this description and says this will give to perceptive players the idea that this isn't a very much a real running company currently, because if this was a business mailbox, it wouldn't have been so disused. But since it is, the players can, from this, conclude some things. But you don't tell them anything. And this is incredibly well done. And the book is full of such well thought out and guided hints of how to give players the best experience, to make them feel that they have all the control of how the investigation is going. Other handouts include wonderfully redrawn documents that are some real engineering blueprints of machines used in the period in the war, and then they're hand redrawn to add the supernatural elements onto the vehicle itself and so on. And there are journal entries from the scientists and hand-drawn high-quality art that is, and I mean top quality, pencil drawings of things in those diaries and drawings and so on that depicted the supernatural elements that are needed to be added. And this whole thing is in both English and its native language, so that you can have, if you have the players who understand it, you can have a handout that is kind of looking like it would be completely original how it would be in the world. Darn impressive. And that's not all. You say have a film reel made from some real photographs or movie or something like that from the period, and then a character is edited in so that it looks like the character from the campaign is the main actress of the movie. But you can see some cells of the reel that show the previous, so you can sort of blend and immerse as you go along. And that sort of thing is another handout, and so on and so forth. There's plenty in this to really make the campaign shine. And, like, the polish is amazing. So, as such, first, before I get into how's the campaign and would I recommend it and so on, let's see, are there any flaws? Well, because people say that if you don't find some critical, horrible flaws, you're one of those overexcitable YouTubers that just gets all hyped because they're already, getting theirs and whatnot. But so I searched and I was detailed and so on, and barely I could find anything. It's such a perfectionist piece of work that feels like it's labor of love. It shows that this is like a personal project of enjoyment. So are there flaws? Yes, there are flaws. they're so minor that my search was comedic, to be fair, in the end. Firstly, for example, the minor of the two flaws that I could find, in the main book, there are a couple of handouts that are double printed, sort of. I believe as an error, but they're not like a printing error in the sense that they're literally double printed. It's more like there's two different versions from two different versions of the book. You have a handout about usefulness and relevance of Bibliothèque of Morocco to the players, you know, the Library of Morocco. That is done twice, and there's barely any difference, as far as I remember, in printing. So would that be included to cut it out twice? I don't believe so, given the format otherwise. And another one previously found was meeting in relation with Hélène Benatar, who is a contact. And that one has like exactly two different versions of sort of tone and address from probably two different versions of the book to be finalized. Is this a printing error, editing error, or not error at all? And you just get these two handouts double printed. I don't believe it's the last, because there's close to 100 of these handouts that are all unique and useful. So why would only these two be doubled without change in language or purpose? I'm not sure, but see, I was looking for errors. Then, more relevant thing that I would say, I wouldn't call it a mistake exactly, but that's the only other negative. For first thing, I should say the positive of it. The tone is nearly completely neutral, even though there's some politics involved in the historic period, but most of you will be glad to find that the tone is pretty neutral, and there's no sections that tell you what to do and how to handle it, and the players can join, anyone do whatever they want. Total freedom and respect towards the player and the player's ability to, you know, be their own morals and not inherit them from somebody else. Except in the smallest of touches of saying that they wouldn't recommend you do the accents for this. Now, this is pretty fair and respectful of them to say that they don't forbid you from doing it. They just wouldn't recommend it themselves, which is fair and fine. And therefore, I'm not at odds with them being able to recommend it. I'm just thinking that it would be perhaps better polish of tone to give it sort of as a potential suggestion, depending on the skill of the players, as opposed to a general recommendation. That's the biggest flaw I could find. Why? Because all in all, whilst fair enough, this is a Casablanca campaign. I grew up with people doing accents from Casablanca and doing them well, with love, with care, with respect, with lovability. Now, how accurate it is historically, I do not know. But I've seen Bugs Bunny do it, I've seen Genie from Aladdin do it when explaining about not resurrecting people, and I've played an entire Quest for Glory 5, one of the bigger Western RPGs and one of the best and nicest ones, that has some full voiced characters that, you know, spend the entire campaign speaking and referencing Casablanca. And then if I'm the DM and I get this opportunity, of course I'm gonna try it, since I love voice acting and I'm somewhat good at it, hopefully. And even if I make a mess out of it, it's, you know, something I would want to try with no disrespect to anybody. Therefore, that is the only slight mismatch of tone that I could possibly dredge out from it. Maybe you believe some things are mentioned too many times or too little times, but that's about as little or as much flaws as there is. I haven't even found spelling mistakes and stuff like that this time around, though then again it is a bit of a longer books. I may have missed one or two, but this is on high quality grounds comparing with other indie stuff that I've been reading, where I found a bunch of spelling mistakes, grammar mistakes. None of it here. This is incredibly well done with all these languages and stuff. Now, I don't speak every single one of them, so I didn't get to check accuracy in some non-English languages, but as I said, from the quality overall, it seems wondrous. If there's one thing that I would consider a wish, because this is such close to perfection thing that I'm just that impressed, then I would say glossary that is included in the end is very short. With all these new words from all these languages, several are not included. Lots of them are not included at the end in the glossary, and there's no pronunciation guide. Now, this could be inserted into the glossary at no more loss than half a page, I believe, and it would help tremendous with something so polished and perfected for players to have a great opportunity to learn the real atmosphere to the end. Because do you really want purely Western English speakers to be pronouncing your French phrases and Croatian phrases and so on and so forth that you didn't give them a pronunciation guide for? There is no chance that anybody's gonna get it on the first try. But to get the full sound atmosphere, since care is dedicated to it, might as well provide the pronunciation guide, since already sometimes alternative spellings on different languages are provided as is. So why not? That would be my wish. And then that and slight rebalance of that one speck of tone, and that this would have been perfection, in my opinion. I mean, what in the world is perfect? So, I was positively surprised, especially after frankly hating modules for decades, because, you know, they weren't enjoyable for DMs and players, whilst this one is actually really enjoyable to teach DMs and players off of. Especially DMs, I believe. But yes, it would be enjoyable for players too. So does that mean that I recommend it immensely for everybody? No, not exactly. Why? Well, you would need to sort of like history to want to get this, I think. Because the whole thing is very historically atmospheric and sort of spur of the moment of the times thing. So unless you want to dip yourself deep into this, then there's no real chance that you'll be feeling like you got what you wanted out of it. So pity as that is, that eliminates some of the market. Now, further than that, this is a non-issue for me. I love how this is paced and it's wonderful and actiony, but it's still not one of those things that you can put in front of a group that will complain if there is not combat within 15 minutes of your starting to speak. This is paced like a movie, and an action movie with lots of shootouts and monster here and there, and you know, mystic secrets and ghouls and crypts and dungeons, yes. But it's much more like Indiana Jones than like, you know, total carnage. So you do not and should not expect that there's a fight 20 times a day or 10 times a day. There's maybe a day where that'll happen, but usually you can expect 1 or 2 or 3 fights per day. It's not exactly a thing that is meant for such players that don't have the concentration, the attention span, the love for setting and surroundings, because this is something where you want to go around and visit the hotels and do the detective work and speak to people and speak to actors and be on the movie set and listen to prophecies and flip through ancient books and visit Man on the Mountain, who is old ancient mystic, and so on and so forth. and all that in that period noir. So if a player doesn't want to roleplay that, then there's no way to drag them into it. But on the other hand, I loved it from what I saw, and I'll keep it to reread it for such an occasion because I liked it. That's the conclusion of how it would get into your budget. How's the campaign? It's nice. It's what you'd expect. It's, a classic. It doesn't break any new grounds with anything else except by high quality and polish and getting exactly what you would imagine when thinking about it. In fact, you would imagine that it wouldn't be that good because you usually imagine a classic more polished than one of these books and modules on it would be. I'm frequently disappointed in such cases, but here it met every single expectation about it. Also, character creation would be immensely broad and free for players. There's lots of freedom here, so there's no pressure to filter some of your players' ideas. They can be almost of any age, of any calling, of any background, of any nationality, of anything really. There's plenty of play to be had. It won't disengage, per se, many people if they start getting into it. That's a very important thing with these sorts of things. And I would say help to new players is immense because there's a whole incredible bunch of character sheets that are already pre-noted, pre-generated. You just print them and you pick them, like if you had like 40 people to pick from for a role-playing video game, if you need to. But otherwise, of course, you have a blank character sheet to fill out yourself if you want one, which most of us will. But whoever wants to flip through these and get ideas, there's so many of them. This is the record that I've seen thus far of full one-page character sheets printed at once for a single module that I've thus far read. And I read hundreds. So those are my conclusions after detailedly going through it. As I said, aim to reread it once again in some moment in the future when I get the time to even more digest it, because I liked the style of DM exposition that much. That's what truly shined for me the most at number 1, and number 2 that was very much on par with that was all the authenticity of the additional stuff. Very fun. So, adventure, if you thought this was useful or unique, perhaps you can spare me a click. And I could see you here next or even possibly every week, though then again currently I am at once in 2 weeks schedule due to being busy with some other things, but I'm not decreasing my interest in doing this. I'm just rescheduling like this. If you haven't yet, check out my project of translating for you interesting words from real Thieves' Cant dictionary of 19th century and earlier Victorian London. See you in the next episode. Bye.